Alright, so today's topic is cooling, and there's so much I want to cover with this. I'm actually going to break this up into two videos. Using the good old parts car here, we're going to dive into a couple things so I can show you everything from draining it, changing everything, to filling. So in this first part, we're going to go ahead and cover, obviously, drain the coolant, show you how to change the coolant bottle, the water pump, thermostat. I'll show you the different hoses and clamps you're going to find. I'll show you a pressure test, and then I'll go over kind of big picture where leaks can come from. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. I'll go ahead and release these kind of back to back. That way it still kind of keeps them together. And when I do the next one, I'll cover what's the rest of in that one. Your problems can be overheating, it's not warming up fast enough, it's not warming up at all, no heat out of your vents, obviously leaks, and then something else is purging out of that coolant bottle. Right off the bat, always check to make sure if you're low, and if you're low, where's it going? Are you burning it, are you leaking it? And then different failing components. So let's dive into this. Bear with me. Like I said, part one is number of 2 parts. And we're just going to dive right into this. So before doing any work on the cooling system, if you're going to replace something, you're going to need to drain it. So on the driver's side here, that guy right there, that guy right there, is a 1/4 inch ratchet with extension. So what you're going to do is it's a 1/4 inch square. Make sure you got your bucket below, because it'll actually fall out right there. And you just give it a little turn, and it kind of like turns and pops out. Now most of these I found are stripped, so I mean to like. But what I ended up doing was taking a flathead, kind of prying as I use the 1/4 inch to turn. So here's a coolant pressure tester. Show you how to use this thing. So here's one of the problems we found. Cap broke. This is what it should look like. Now for the pressure tester, you use this attachment. It's got the screw on. Screw it on your coolant reservoir. And you take this guy. It'll pop. That's it locked in. So you take this guy and you're gonna pump it till you hit 15, and then go just above 15. So there we are, just above 15. And it's best to do this when it's really quiet. But you want to hear for any kind of hissing, really any noise, period. You can go through and make sure your hoses are nice and hard. What we've actually diagnosed here is where it's wet, there's a crack. And it actually sprayed on the belt. The belt was carrying it, and you can see where it's wet on the hood here. Now there's one plug. Here's where your coolant light sensor. Just unplug that, and then it'll come right out. Now the hoses may be a little difficult to get off, so you might use a flathead to kind of help as you kind of tug. Watch when tugging, because when it lets go, you could hit something with your hand. Now is also a time if you wanted to replace the other hoses if they seem like they're dingy. You can change those now too while you have this out. Also, if you want to change the old style clamps to the screw type, you can also do that now. Is the 2 different types of clamps you're going to run into. So OEM, you're going to have these pinch ones. And then a lot of people will actually swap to these screw type because they're a lot easier to use, a lot easier to get to, and they're cheaper. Obviously with this, usually it's like an 8mm socket or just a flathead. Or these guys, I like to get a big pair of pliers. So we can't talk about the cooling system without leaks. So basically, you know, the motor could leak, hoses can leak, and other external components, aka heater core. So starting with hoses, right off the bat, over here off your coolant bottle. Obviously your coolant bottle can actually crack and leak, as you saw with the other part of this video. If you have a bad cap, it'll actually come out this little drain hose. So technically not like a leak, but it is a leak. Obviously these two overflow hoses, you know, at any point on either end. And then you've got your actual fill hose. Your lower radiator hose is down here. You got your upper radiator hose. You got this bypass hose here. Under here is an O-ring, so that could potentially crack and leak. This chases all the way back, stops at your throttle body, which there's an in and out, so that could all potentially leak. And that eventually leads back to your heater core hoses. So there's an in and out there. So again, more opportunity for leaks. Like I said, your actual heater core, which you'll see on your floor, you'll get, you know, dampness, wetness in your footwells. That's usually a pretty good indicator that that's cracked and leaking. As far as the motor, your water pump, whether it be the gasket or the weep hole that's built into it, that'll drip and leak. The front timing cover has water jackets going through it, so that could potentially leak. Obviously, if your head gasket's bad, externally, as well as your intake gasket, which this one's actually okay. I guess the guy just did it. But you would actually see coolant pooling down here on the transmission or just below the thermostat housing. Which brings me to the next piece. Your thermostat housing has a gasket, so that could potentially leak. The coolant sensor, if something that somehow leaks. And then straight back here, coming out of your heater core, goes into the back of the lower intake manifold. Also another O-ring there that could leak. And then as well as on this side for your intake gasket, underneath your power steering pump, there's like a little valley that'll pull coolant. So pretty much that's all the different areas that could leak. My suggestion is if you think you have a leak and you can't see it up top, throw a big piece of cardboard underneath your car overnight after driving while the car's still hot. Leave it overnight. Come morning when the car is cool, pull it out and kind of go off the location, and you know, this should help you whether it's the front, the back, you know, left or right. And hopefully that helps you out. Alright, so we're going to tackle this water pump. This water pump's right here. And basically what you need to do is get the pulley off, and then you get the water pump off. And then a couple of things around it. Here, take your 8mm, and these are 10mm. So what you're going to do is, since you're going to be pushing this way, you're going to create pressure the other way. So there's one. There's two. You're going to go towards the firewall. You go towards the firewall, pull it off of just a cellular pulley, and slowly release tension. That center hub is actually the pump. The outer is just the pulley. you'll have 5 8mm bolts. Alright, so this one you pry it up too. There's a couple of lips here. Just give it a little and water pump. Okay, so before we install the new one, we need to get this nice and cleaned up. A couple ways you can go about it. I'd probably say most would use maybe like a razor blade, or they actually make scrapers to get that stuff off there. My weapon of choice is a wire wheel. Either way, I suggest stuffing paper towels down inside there so that nothing gets down in the crevice. Alright, so as you can see, nice and smooth and clean. Ready to rock and roll on that end. There's a new pump with the supplied gasket. Now you may have to spin it a few times because it only goes one way, which I have found here. Something else to look at is, notice is a different design. This is an updated design from the other one that has just a bunch of smaller fins. And I find this to be a tad more efficient. So this is my go-to. I always make sure I find this one when I go to get new water pumps. To add a blue gasket maker, that's the specific water pump stuff. What I like to do is I'll run a small bead around here. I'll lay my gasket on, make sure it seats right, and then what I'll do is I'll find the orientation as to which way the pump needs to go. And then once I find that, I'll take it back out real quick. I'll run a small bead around here. We'll put the pump back on, and we'll tighten her down. So now we got our pump installed here. We're going to go ahead and install our pulley here. Get those 4 bolts on there. Put our belt back on, and we'll be ready for filling and bleeding. And for our belt, we left it here like we did. You'll go ahead and just push down here. And what you're going to do is you're going to use the tensioner to release tension, and you're going to push down to the slides underneath that pulley. Let it slide into place. Pull towards the firewall. Slide it under there. Make sure you double check everything. Make sure you have complete contact on every pulley. Don't forget you have your diagram here, which will bolt back on right here. Go ahead and bring your fill hose back up. On there. So I just like these guys. Here to there. A little overflow hose. Now to tackle the thermostat, the route I'm going to show you is we're going to take out the air box. Battery's already out, but you can also take that out. And that'll help you get down underneath to get the 2 bolts on the thermostat housing. You'll need to do a wrench, and the other will use a socket. So let's dive into it. So you're going to put a 15 on the bottom and a 13 on the top. Set that aside. So what we're going to do is get our air box out. And you'll note that the battery's kind of already gone, but you can take it out. It's always good to kind of undo it anyway since you're working on the car. But yeah, let's get this out. First, we need a flathead to undo the hose and the end of the box here. MAF sensor and the air intake sensor. To the side. Pull this PCV tube out of here. $10mm right here. 10mm right there. You'll see what I'm talking about. Right below the throttle body is the upper bolt. And yeah, down back there is another one. 13mm. Kind of reach up behind here. You'll be able to break it loose. This one we're gonna get a little sneaky here. Alright, so I'm going to redact that first part. And we're going to go ahead and hit it with a shallow well, as you can see. Alright, there's your thermostat housing. You saw it kind of fell out the front here. What's funny is, so they notched that back one, so it would appear that you could just loosen and pull it out. Well, no. It literally takes to the last thread for this to even clear how tall the thermostat sits inside. Get in there to it. Ta-da! Thermostat. You know, get your thermostat set in there. Get this guy kind of in place. My advice is get that top bolt first. Remember, just keep reversing what you did. Put your hose back on. Put your hose back on. Get that guy in there. There we go. That. On that stud. And that stud. Slide your air filter in. Last but not least, your air box with your hose. Make sure the bottom half sits where it needs to be with those guys. And screw it down. Don't forget your plugs. That guy. Rock and roll.